The Roman Republic in 73 BCE was the undisputed superpower of the Mediterranean, a well-oiled machine of conquest, engineering, and profound self-satisfaction. And like any thriving economy, it ran on a certain unpaid internship program. We call it slavery. Down in Capua, a man named Lentulus Batiatus ran a particularly grim business, a gladiator school, or ludus. This wasn't a school for learning philosophy, it was a human processing plant where men were bought cheap, trained to kill artistically, and then rented out to die for the entertainment of the masses. Among his recent acquisitions was a Thracian named Spartacus, a man who probably had better things to do than become public property. The security plan at this facility, which housed hundreds of the strongest, most dangerous men in the region, was apparently based on the honor system. A truly brilliant management strategy that would have absolutely no unforeseen consequences. One day, roughly 70 of these gladiators decided they'd had enough of the terrible food and the constant threat of being stabbed for applause. Their grand, coordinated breakout weaponized the most fearsome tools they could find: kitchen cleavers and cooking spits. After overpowering the guards with what was essentially catering equipment, they seized a wagon full of actual gladiator weapons and fought their way out of Capua. Rome, hearing news of this minor workplace dispute, reacted with the kind of urgency you'd reserve for a stray cat stuck in a tree. They sent a praetor, Gaius Claudius Glaber, with a militia of about 3,000 men. Not legions, mind you. These were the ancient world's equivalent of weekend mall cops, because clearly a handful of escaped entertainers posed no real threat. Glaber tracked them to the slopes of Mount Vesuvius and, in a stroke of tactical genius, blocked the only known road up or down, deciding to just wait for them to starve. He failed to account for the fact that desperate people get creative. Spartacus and his men braided ropes from wild vines, rappelled down a sheer cliff on the other side of the volcano, and completely annihilated the sleeping Roman force from behind. It was Rome's first, but certainly not last, wait, what? Moment of the war. News of this victory spread like wildfire. Suddenly, this wasn't just a band of escaped gladiators, it was an idea. From all over the Italian countryside, the desperate and dispossessed began to flock to Spartacus's banner. Runaway slaves, shepherds, disgruntled farmers, anyone who had been chewed up and spat out by the Roman system. The small group of 70 ballooned to thousands, then tens of thousands. They were a chaotic, diverse mix of Gauls, Germans, and Thracians, led by a council including Spartacus, the fierce Gaul Crixus, and Onomas. Their first order of business was weapons. They took captured Roman equipment and also turned every farm tool they could find into a spear or a sword. Imagine the logistical nightmare of trying to feed and organize an army of 70,000 people who have no state, no supply lines, and all speak different languages. Their one unifying principle was a deep, abiding hatred for Rome. That, and the shared understanding, would be unpleasant. Back in Rome, the Senate was starting to get nervous. This was no longer a local disturbance, it was a full-blown insurrection in their own backyard. So, in 72 BCE, they did what they always did when faced with a serious problem. They sent The consuls. Both of them, Lucius Gellius Publicola and Gnaeus Cornelius Lentulus Clodianus, two men with very long names and very short-lived military careers, marched south with multiple legions. The plan was simple. One consul would attack from the north, the other from the south, crushing the slave army between them. It was a perfectly good Roman strategy that had worked 100 times before. Except Spartacus wasn't a typical barbarian king. He didn't play by the rules. He first turned on Lentulus's legions and defeated them. Then he immediately force-marched his army and smashed into Gellius's forces before they even knew what was happening. Two Roman consular armies, the pride of the Republic, were humiliated by a bunch of ex-slaves. In Rome, the mood shifted from mild annoyance to pure, unadulterated panic. With the consuls defeated, the road north was wide open. The prevailing theory is that Spartacus's goal was to lead his people over the Alps, out of Italy, and back to their respective homelands. Freedom. They marched the entire length of the Italian peninsula, a moving city of rebellion. Along the way, they met another Roman army near Mutina, led by the governor of Cisalpine Gaul, Gaius Cassius Longinus. And, in what was becoming a predictable pattern, they beat him too. At this point, they were at the foothills of the Alps. The exit was right there. They had done it. And then, for reasons historians have been arguing about for 2,000 years, they turned around. They marched all the way back south. Was it a leadership dispute with Crixus, who reportedly preferred plundering Italy to leaving it? Was the massive horde of non-combatants too difficult to get across the mountains? Or did they just look at the snow-capped peaks and collectively decided they preferred the Italian climate? Whatever the reason, it was a fatal decision. They had given Rome the one thing it needed: time. The Senate was officially out of ideas and competent generals, so they made a call to the Roman equivalent of a private military contractor, Marcus Licinius Crassus. Crassus was, by a massive margin, the richest man in Rome. He'd made his fortune during Sulla's proscriptions, buying up the property of executed citizens at bargain prices. A real man of the people. He wasn't just rich, he was ambitious and desperate for a military victory to rival his political nemesis, Pompey the Great. He saw the Spartacus problem not as a crisis, but as an investment opportunity. Crassus raised 6 new legions, combined them with the remnants of the consular armies, and immediately instituted a brutal ancient form of discipline: decimation. When one cohort broke and ran in an early skirmish, he had the entire unit divided into groups of 10 and forced every group to beat one of their own to death. The message was clear: I am scarier than the enemy. It was horrifyingly effective. Roman morale suddenly improved a great deal. Crassus wasn't interested in a fair fight. His strategy was pure, suffocating logistics. He managed to corner Spartacus's entire army in the southernmost tip of Italy, the peninsula of Bruttium. And then he ordered his legions to build a wall. Not a small fence, but a ditch and rampart stretching 37 miles from one sea to the other, effectively sealing them in. It was an incredible feat of engineering built in a matter of weeks. Spartacus and his 100,000-plus followers were now trapped, with winter approaching and supplies dwindling. In a desperate move, Spartacus tried to hire Cilician pirates to ferry his army to Sicily, a land with a long history of slave revolts. The pirates, in a move that surprises absolutely no one familiar with pirates, took his money and then promptly sailed away without picking anyone up. Trapped by the richest man in Rome on land and betrayed by the most unreliable criminals on the sea, the options were running out. Facing starvation, Spartacus had no choice but to attempt a breakout. On a stormy winter night, his forces filled a section of the ditch with wood and earth and charged across, breaching Crassus's inescapable wall. It was a victory, but a costly one. Now free, the rebel army began to fracture. Several Gallic and Germanic contingents broke away, only to be hunted down and destroyed by Crassus's pursuing legions. The final confrontation came in 71 BCE near the Siler River. Plutarch claims that Spartacus, knowing the end was near, killed his own horse, declaring that if he won, he'd have plenty of horses, and if he lost, he wouldn't need one. He fought with incredible bravery, cutting his way through Roman soldiers trying to reach Crassus himself, but he was eventually overwhelmed and killed. His body was lost in the carnage and never identified. For the 6,000 survivors of his army, Crassus had one final message. He had them all crucified. Their crosses lined the Appian Way, the main road from Capua to Rome, for 120 miles. A gruesome, unmissable warning to anyone who might get a similar idea. Just as Crassus was finishing up, Pompey returned from Spain, mopped up a few thousand fugitives, and wrote to the Senate claiming that while Crassus had beaten the slaves, he, Pompey, had extirpated the war by its roots. The credit stealing was as Roman as the crucifixion. So, what was the point of it all? The Third Servile War, as it came to be known, accomplished basically nothing for the enslaved people of Rome. No laws were changed, the system of slavery didn't even wobble. If anything, it became more entrenched and brutal in the years that followed. The rebellion didn't free the slaves, but it did something else. It terrified the masters. For 2 years, a single man and an army of the forgotten had held the entire Roman Republic hostage, defeating army after army and threatening the city itself. The name Spartacus became a bogeyman for the Roman elite, a symbol of the nightmare scenario that simmered just beneath the surface of their society. And in the long run, the war helped accelerate the death of the Republic, proving that the state was too weak and that only powerful, ruthless individuals like Crassus and Pompey could protect Rome from its internal demons. It was a failure that became a legend, a story of defiance so powerful that it has echoed for millennia, reminding everyone that even the most powerful empires are only ever a few broken chains away from a full-scale panic attack. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!